Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. I have a full house today. Joining me, my co-host, filling in for Mr. Brad, is Audie Chamberlain.
Hey, everyone.
We also have Morgan joining us to talk a little bit about Luxury Connect. And our special guest today is Mr. Rob Hahn. Everyone say hi.
What's up?
Morning. Hey.
Morning.
So it sounds like we're all over the country today. I'm broadcasting from New York. And Audie, where are you?
I'm in Los Angeles.
Morgan?
Another LA.
You're in LA too, right?
I'm in LA, yep. And just saw Audie last night.
Yep. And I'm in Houston.
Awesome. Well, we got
lovely and gorgeous.
We got the whole country covered today. All right. So first, we're going to have Morgan tell us a little bit about Luxury Connect and how did it go, Morgan? Looks
Absolutely.
like a full house.
Yeah. It was. We had a great event last night, yesterday at the Beverly Hills Hotel. Appropriate setting for a luxury event. It was great. We had Dolly Lenz, who's one of the best real estate brokers in the country, does a ton of volume out of New York, Moderate, and had some incredible guests from folks from Oppenheimer talking about the economy to top agents from around the country. So it was a really spectacular event, bookended by some great networking at two incredible properties in Beverly Hills. We ended at a $43 million modern new construction just down the street, hosted by Hilton Highland and the John Arrow Group, and it was really a stunner. So if you haven't been, you should come if you are interested in the luxury market. We'll do it again next year, I'm sure. But yeah, that's the commercial. It was great. Look for pictures online. It was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Yeah, it looks like a good time. That one house, everyone was posting pictures from the $43 million listing. I'm like, oh, I need that house.
Yeah, and then the first house was no slouch either. It was a mid-century modern rebuild, $14 million kind of indoor outdoor, very zen. And that was hosted by Telus Properties, and it was exquisite too. So it's always fun to go dream, wander around houses that you usually wouldn't be let inside of. So it was fun.
That's awesome. All right, so today we're going to discuss a couple of the top stories. First one, Opendoor is a bigger deal than Zillow. So obviously the news about Opendoor has been hitting the industry pretty hard, and it seems like everyone's got their opinion on it. Basically what it is an app where you're able to buy and sell a property pretty much within 48 hours, which is impressive. But of course, everyone is freaking out because they think that means that's the end of realtors. So does anyone have an opinion on this?
I guess I'll start with that. I wrote about Opendoor back in 2014 and thought they were a pretty big deal then based on the potential. But and I think Teak did a really good job actually of covering probably what is the most important thing. And I think realtors who are talking about it are just kind of missing they're just sort of missing the big picture here. It's not about brokerage. I don't think Opendoor is in this to make some whatever huge amounts of money on brokerage side of things. Even though they're probably going to make a little bit of money on the spread, right? The buy, bid and ask. I think where they're really going to end up making money is on the mortgage side. Because I'm sort of researching it right now. I got to tell you, the seller financing piece, what we're sort of overlooking is the fact that most of that stuff is exempt from CFPB regulations and all the other regulations that make mortgage such a pain in the ass. So, I think it's a really big deal. Do I think and quite frankly, Opendoor, if they really do ultimately get to where things want to be, yeah, they're going to be far more disruptive than Zillow or anybody ever was, because they will change the underlying transactional structure, right? So,
but Rob, do you think it's a niche? Because when we look at it, we don't really see it working for something like a luxury market. Part of this is built on having inventory, and you're not going to hold a property that sits for 2 years if you're the institution holding it.
I don't know if it's a niche. In fact, I almost feel like when it comes to something like a $43 million house, that's probably more of a niche than housing in general. I actually could very easily see Opendoor becoming the default kind of way we buy and sell houses in the future. Right? I mean, effectively, so what I wrote about them, I don't know, a couple years back is effectively what Open Door wants to do is become a market maker for real property.
Yeah.
The difficulty with that obviously is, houses are not commodities. So it's really, really tough to be a market maker with a, bid and ask spread and, I'll buy it at 30, I'll sell it for 32, that kind of deal. But I think these guys are sort of trying that and they're trying to figure it out. But if you think along those lines, what you find is the number one hurdle you have to overcome is financing.
Right.
It is the problem. And I think, and that's just my guess. It's my gut feeling. I don't know those guys. I haven't talked to them. I have no special insight. But if you just think about it, that's where things are going to be insane. It's going to be crazy. From a consumer behavior standpoint, I think realtors are used to dealing with, sellers in particular, right? Who are going to make a deal die because they only give them $1,000 concession or whatever. So I could see realtors looking at Open Door saying, that's just nuts. Who the hell wants to take that kind of a loss? But I don't know. I mean, as a consumer, when I sold my last house, and I think I wrote about this, I remember telling my agent, my listing agent, pre-market this thing because I knew you're going to. And if you get an offer that's within 10% of our asking price, let's just take it and get it done, and I want to move out. I mean, I think we're going to see that being
No,
more
I
and more.
agree. I agree on liquidity. I think that they're really onto something there. And when I think about it, and I was going through all the comments earlier this week, it feels more like a natural progression of what Glenn's built at Redfin than something so radical and just dropping from outer space on the industry. I think that there are parallels also, if you think about Uber, right? Because a lot of comments talking about having access to the house. Well, we all use Uber, even though we know for a fact people have been murdered in an Uber by an Uber driver, but we still give them a pass on security for that convenience and that experience, and we all love Uber. So I think that there's something happening there, and it's going to be really interesting to watch.
Yeah. I mean, it's something I'm curious about. Maybe it's a question for Danielle. I imagine you're a listing agent, right? And you have a customer, you have a client who needs to move. Maybe he's relocated, maybe they found their dream house, and it's a multiple bid situation, and they need to get in there and try and win that house, right? Wouldn't as a listing agent, wouldn't you have to think about telling them? You might think about selling your house to Open Door, even if you're going to take a bit of a loss, so that you're not putting in a bid on your next home with a seller contingency on it. Wouldn't that have to be part of the calculation?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, obviously realtors owe the fiduciary duty to their clients, and if they're not giving them all the options, you're only hurting your clients in the long run. So I guess if there is a time constraint where you really do have to get the house sold, the problem is, especially in my area where we're talking in way smaller numbers than we are in any of the areas that you guys are in, somebody could be, their mortgage could be more than what Open Door is willing to pay for it. So I think that's really going to be, the deciding factor in some of these sales is, can these people afford to sell their house for that cheap? So, but yeah, not disclosing it to your clients is definitely, I don't know, in my opinion, you're not giving them their options and you're not working in their best interests. So should be interesting to see how it all plays out.
What happens?
But Rob, I do think, to your point about the market making, one of the fascinating thing about Ubers is part of their business is auto financing, and opening up huge lines of credit to basically create a whole new marketplace for people that couldn't access automobiles, right? There's a whole bunch of issues around that. But when you look at Open Door and the ability to create an entire marketplace through new ways of financing and through new ways of buying and selling homes, I think it just is a much bigger story than people give it credit for on the surface.
Oh, it's huge, man. I mean, think about it. Mortgage is the backbone of the global financial system. Right? It's think about it, the investors that are buying these mortgage-backed securities, we're talking about pension funds and insurance companies, and we're not talking hundreds of millions of dollars, we're talking hundreds of billions of dollars. And if they have another option to invest in seller financing, with a company like Open Door, I mean, it's transformative, right? I mean, one of the things I wrote about, and I think is really interesting about it is, if Open Door or a company like them can in fact become, we'll call it a market maker, right? I think rentals die. Like, why would you ever rent? You know, if you could buy a house within 3 days, and if you want to get out of a house, you could get out of the house in 3 days. Why would you ever rent, right? I mean, why wouldn't you just buy? And then if something happens, you're like, oh, I need to move. Hey, Open Door, I'd like to sell my house, and I'd like to buy another house in wherever Portland that I'm moving to, what have you. I mean, it's actually kind of amazing what the implications of something like this, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, they're big. They're huge.
All right, let's move on to the next story. We don't want to take up too much time on that one. All right, so why millennials are the future of real estate, which makes me all giddy inside. Anything about a millennial just makes me smile and makes me happy. So this article was published, I guess basically Zillow was doing some research on millennials as buyers and sellers, and I'm sure most of us know at this point that millennials are making up the majority of buyers, but they're also starting to creep up, you know, in terms of percentages of home sellers. So the older millennials, they bought their first house, now they're ready to move on to their second house. And I think the one thing that was missing from this article, which really kind of bothered me, was the fact that we're not talking about millennials being the future of real estate in terms of actual real estate agents. So yes, we know millennials are going to be the consumers, but it's missing that key piece of, hey, all you realtors, you need to start waking up and paying attention to these young agents, because in 10 years from now, that's who's going to be doing all the business. So what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I can start, you know, as at Inman, we've seen a huge influx of younger readers, attendees at our events, all of these types of things. And as the market has obviously improved, it's become a more attractive profession opportunity for young folks, you know, and so you have obviously this huge demographic group of people coming in, but you also have, you know, a large group of very, you know, senior and experienced agents who are soon to be leaving, right? And so we talk a lot about like an experience gap or an experience knowledge vacuum. And I think to your point, Danielle, that if we're going to get an influx of young and new agents who are excited about the opportunity, a bridge has to be built between the two groups to make sure that the customer experience and, you know, the knowledge transfer is there. So I think it's really, you're right that an article or, you know, talking about millennials only from the consumer side and not how it impacts, you know, realtors, agents, brokerage is, you know, that's a big part of the discussion, I think.
Well, yeah, because then you have to wonder if you have all these millennial consumers. And I was actually at an RPAC event last night in my local area. And, you know, someone said to me, they're like, well, do you think a 25-year-old buyer wants to work with a 75-year-old real estate agent? It kind of put that thought in my mind. If I was a consumer, I would want to work with somebody that's younger, that knows the technology, that's, you know, on my wavelength. So I think that's also important to recognize is, you know, not that we want to push these older agents out, but we need to, like you said, bridge that gap of expertise and get these older agents to help the younger agents and give them some of that knowledge and wisdom, pass it on.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that the numbers, the stats about them, you know, less likely to work with an agent, but being more loyal. I thought that was very interesting. You know, I was at Luxury Connect at lunch yesterday, having lunch with someone, bought a property 3 years ago, okay? Bought a bottle of Johnny Walker Blue Label to give to the agent as a gift for the experience. That Johnny Walker Blue Label sat on a shelf for 3 years collecting dust because the agent never sent a single communication after the transaction. So I think that when I go through this data and I see what they're talking about with loyalty and with staying in touch and referring, yeah, they're less likely to work with an agent, but they're also showing much more potential as far as the loyalty and the referral opportunities. So it is kind of some mixed messages, but certainly opportunities there for everyone in the industry. And the other point I would say as a takeaway for me is, you know, we kind of blanket label people. And I was at a presentation a few years ago, Sean Combs, one of his marketing folks, was talking about it. You know, the person going into college's lifestyle versus the person coming out of college versus the person moving into their second, career position. We can't just say millennial. I mean, there's within it subsets of groups that are very much, and I'm really looking forward to going through the whole report. But I think that, as an industry, we tend to label people without really thinking that through. Rob, what do you think?
Well, on the one level, I find the statement that millennials are the future of real estate to be profoundly uninteresting. Seeing as how millennials are the future of the people.
Largest group of people in the world, right?
Yeah, so it's almost like saying the future of the industry are the people who will remain alive. Yeah, that's actually right. True. On the other hand, I think I don't think we should make that big a deal of it in the following sense. Danielle, I found your statement kind of interesting that younger millennial consumers want to work with younger millennial agents, who are, tech savvy with it, et cetera. And I'm thinking to myself, would you demand that your doctor who has to operate on you be a millennial? Or would you care? Would you maybe rather have someone 60?
I'm going to give you a real life example. So when I became an adult, so I was seeing my pediatrician as a child, and then I think it was probably when I turned 17 or 18, and my pediatrician was the typical doctor, white-haired older man. And, I would go into the doctors and I told him that I had a lot of headaches, and he told me, well, it's because you're eating too many tomatoes. And I'm like, what? That doesn't even make sense. And he's like, well, you're Italian, you probably eat a lot of sauce. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not causing my headaches. So when I went to my actual, primary care physician, she was straight out of college, straight out of medical school. And I'm telling you, she is the best doctor there is because it's so fresh. She's not tainted. She's not over it. You can just feel the difference. So, that was something that I felt just with a doctor, but no, I wouldn't necessarily say, well, I want a millennial surgeon, but to me, somebody that's fresh out of medical school in that example is going to be more, up to date with the newest technologies and giving me the best care. That's just my opinion though.
So the thing about that is I would think for me, it would be the exact opposite, right? If I have to go in for, some serious surgery, I don't want to be the second person that the doctor's operated on. I want to be the 2000th. And so when we hear statements like, hey, older agents, y'all better get with it. You better, impart your wisdom because your days are coming to an end. I guess I kind of wonder, is this a statement about millennial consumers? Is this a statement about value of realtors in general? Because I really feel like if your life depended on it, you would not want some fresh out of med school punk kid, no matter how tech savvy he is. You're gonna be like, how many of these have you done? What's your success rate? What does this look like? And I feel like we're not, that's just a question, right? For me, if I'm buying if I'm renting a house, I really don't give a crap who's helping me, with that, right? It's it's a rental. I can get out of it, no big deal. If I'm buying a $700,000 house, that I live in for the rest of my life, I might want somebody with some gray hairs who's been around the block a few times and who knows what the hell they're doing. And of course, have an assistant or somebody who knows the tech stuff and can text me whatever I need and whatnot. But I feel like in other words, I just, the message that we're sending to the industry, right, is that you got to be young and hip and with it. And, and I don't know if that's really the value. I don't really know,
Well, I think the value of a younger agent is one big thing that sticks out in my mind. I remember my first 2 or 3 deals. I was 19 years old. I was a kid. I barely knew the difference between a colonial and a ranch, and I'm out selling houses. But the one thing that sticks out in my mind from those transactions or how eager I was and how passionate I was and how excited I was that oh, my buyer's calling, let me answer on the first ring and give them the update or, some tiny little piece of information that they didn't really need to know, but I was so eager to call them and tell them. And now, I'm approaching my 10-year anniversary in the business and I'm just like, and I'm not that I've lost the passion for it, but, over time you become kind of immune to it, So I don't know. To me, I felt like I probably gave my clients in my earlier career a better level of service just because I was so excited, and it wasn't, the same old, same old. And not that I'm any less, I guess, better of an agent than I was then, but, to me, I think comparing doctors and realtors is kind of tough to do because, yeah, you're right. I'm not going to necessarily want somebody that got their MD yesterday, performing brain surgery on me.
A real serious thing.
What?
Like a real serious. I'm not talking like primary care physician. I'm talking about you need brain surgery. At that point, it might not be how comfortable do I feel with this doctor. It's how many of these.
I would argue the fact that a younger person can stay on their feet longer and go longer without water, and they would do better in surgery because their back wouldn't hurt. So I guess there's always going to be two sides to it. But yeah,
absolutely.
I still stand firm that millennial agents are, they're just, I think the biggest thing is they're more adept to change. So when a new technology comes out, they want to learn it. They want to use it. So I don't agree with that. I think we have a lot to learn from the older agents, but we can't ignore the younger ones. Because if we do, it's happened to me in my career. These older agents, they don't want to take me seriously. They don't care what I have to say. And I'm like, okay, well, talk to me in 15 years when you're not in the business and I'm taking all your clients out to show them houses, because that's what's going to happen. So,
and believe me, like I've heard that the last 5-10 years, Danielle. You hear from YPN all the time, and I guess all I got to say about that is, look, it's the same in whatever industry, right? You could be a lawyer fresh out of law school and think you're the shit, and think you're whatever, and then you walk in and somebody with 10 years experience like, sit down over there, Rook, and draft up some documents. And until you prove yourself, right? Until you prove yourself, you don't get taken seriously. And like it's the same way in the NFL, right? I mean, you could be the #1 draft pick, coming out of college. You're a rookie until you go on the field and prove yourself. You get no respect. You don't deserve any respect from the veterans. And I feel kind of the same way. Look, there are some great millennial agents, right? I mean, there are. And there are people who have really, shown that they know what they're doing. And God bless them, and they get lauded, and they get, whatever. And as an industry, we're obsessed with them. It's like, 30 under 30, 40 under 40, whatever, YPN, et cetera, et cetera. And for whatever reason, we don't get that obsessed with, like, I don't know, where's like the Hall of Fame veterans, 70 over 70. I mean, where's that list, right? Where's
70 over 70. First of all, so I'm a 30 under 30, so I'm going to defund it to the death.
Yeah.
Your 30 under 30 pool of realtors is a lot smaller. If you actually put out a 70 over 70, you're going to have like way too many applications to go through. It's just not feasible to actually do an award like that because there's just too many people.
Yeah, cool.
Oh gosh. All right. Well, let's move on in the next one. So we're quickly approaching 12:30. So obviously there was a big, huge discussion this last week. And we didn't talk about it on the show last Friday because it had just come out the night before and, really wanted to kind of gather the facts and see how everything unfolded, which I'm sure everybody has read all of the blog posts and articles that have been put out about what happened last summer. A couple of I would say 6 industry professionals were riding on a bus from one party to the next party, and some things were said by 3 men and overheard by 3 women in the industry. And there's obviously been a lot of talk and arguments and discussion about this. And I think what we want to focus on today is not so much the he said, she said, or, what are the nitty gritty details of how this played out, because you can go read any of the articles or blog posts about it. But I think we want to touch on, how does this affect our industry and what does this mean for the future of the industry? How can we prevent things like this from happening, and how can we make it so that it's not acceptable for any group of people, whether they're women or men, to feel threatened or, in an uncomfortable situation. So who wants to give us an idea? Let's come up with something we can actually do about this rather than just rehashing everything that happened.
I want to hear from Morgan. Morgan, what should we do? What can we do?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the big takeaway for me is, right, and obviously there's still a ton of questions about the particular incident, but I think, the big thing for me was like, hey, as someone that hosts events, how do you make sure that every person there feels safe, included, welcome, accepted, and that there's, a free exchange of, that every person from every walk of life is able to go learn something, connect, network, and that we really, stand up for an inclusive space for people to come and learn and network and do all the things we say that our events are supposed to be about. So, we took a first step, which was, putting out a code of conduct, which Brad published on Facebook, and you can read, but it really was about reaffirming those things that we think are important to value and protect at our events. And then I think there is, more that can be done, right? Like once you have a code of conduct, you can't just put that out there. You have to train our staff on it. You have to have sponsors and speakers and attendees accept it and adhere to it, right? There has to be a way to enforce it and manage it. We have to make sure ambassadors and people who aren't actual employees of our company understand it and know what that means for them. So I think there's lots more to be done. But yeah, I think it's in service of creating this open, accepting place for everyone, because I think that's the real benefit, right? Like when I talk to people, Inman Connect events are the name says it all. Like people come for the networking, and if you feel like you can't come to these events because you might feel threatened or attacked or whatever, that's the complete antithesis of what we're trying to accomplish. So I'll start with that.
Limiting it to kind of what you said, Danielle, I think we have one of two ways that this goes from how this affects the industry. On the one hand, it could be that we all sort of recognize what the real issue was here, right? And we focus on that, and we deal with it. And I don't think there's any controversy whatsoever around that. And that specifically is violence, right? And threats are unacceptable, right? That's just, and I don't think it has to get into even man versus woman, gender. It's nothing to do with that. Any threat of violence. And talk of the actual violence. That's not just, kidding around, right? Like when Audie and, let's say Audie and Morgan are talking, hey man, I really want to beat that Rob guy up. Okay, this is kidding, like who cares? But if Morgan says, well, I know how to tie him up and then punch him in such a way not to leave any bruises, we can get away with it. Now we've kind of gone to the next level, right? If we focus on that, I don't think there's any problem. I don't. My concern, I think, is that we're going to now take it from here and go to this really somewhat specious kind of, if you feel threatened or unaccepted type of standard, right? That is just completely subjective and completely unworkable in some ways. Because I could go to Inman and claim that I felt threatened by any variety of things, right? So, I know we're going to do this sort of, look, let's just use common sense, right? If I say I just feel threatened by men in glasses, so I'm feeling threatened by Morgan and Audie, like, we would all recognize, like, you're just being ridiculous. But I think that's the danger, and I do worry about it. And we'll see. We'll see. The way I kind of look at it is, what's the next one? Like this particular situation, I thought was pretty obvious. That for a lot of reasons. But bottom line is, just talking about violence against women in that way is not acceptable. It's just not. And then to just take that next step, right, was also unacceptable. And then finally, to call them liars without, coming up with any, any sort of evidence or anything, was also kind of problematic. But, I do worry that it's going to lead to the next crisis. Like, what does the next one look like, right? Is this one where, some women or some men, for that matter, might overhear, men talk or women talking about, whatever, some sexual conquest of theirs, and then gets offended, and I feel threatened, this is not a safe place because, these married women might hit on me. Then it becomes ridiculous, yeah. Right? And it becomes just like censorship and power plays for the sake of power plays. So we'll see. We'll see what the next one is. If the next one is one of those things, and the industry as a whole gets together and say, you know what? That really has nothing to do with violence. It has nothing to do with threats. It has nothing to do with these things that are crossing the line. and maybe y'all should just grow up and grow thicker skin, then we're fine. If the next one that comes up now becomes this, let's jump on this group for, for not violence or not threats, just, things that you find offensive, that I think starts to go down a dark path. And I think we then start to see real fracture and real problems and real PC behavior and all this stuff until everything blows up. So I hope it doesn't go down.
I'm curious, obviously the NAR conference, NAR annual is coming up in a couple of weeks, and I'm curious to see if NAR will address it in any of their sessions, and or I guess just the general feeling and vibe of everybody at the conference. Because, it's no secret that realtors party hard and drink a lot and have fun at these conferences, which is great. But, when it starts to go beyond just having fun and just drinking and just, doing karaoke and discussions and things start to get said that are offending people, I think it's going to be interesting to see how that conference plays out. So.
Well, and it's really important to, think about, for me, the takeaway is a conversation we have all the time. And that is, no matter where you are, if you're in line at Starbucks or you're, at a party or whatever, you have to remember that we're in a world where everything that can be known will be known, right? This is a basic law of the era we're in with technology. Rich Barton is the one I first heard talking about this, but anything known will be known, right? And anything free, we didn't get to reso, will be free, and anything that can be rated will be rated. It's quite brilliant. But if you think about anything known will be known. So we've seen the pop star, was it Ariana Grande, offending, mass numbers in a donut shop because someone had the YouTube, rolling. And so one of the things that I think for me is a big takeaway is that even if we're partying, even if we're having a good time, we have to remember that we're in a world where absolutely everything our behavior is representing us, but we're also there as a guest of Morgan and Brad and the Inman team. So we're really it's very important that we behave in a way that represents that. So for me, the takeaway is just you do have to really think about your behavior in these situations. And we've certainly had some wild nights, in the past, Rob and I specifically at Inman.
I was thinking, man, on that standard audio, I can't go to Inman again because,
No, but at the end,
Brad and Morgan at karaoke.
Listen, but that code of conduct and that way that we carry ourselves, it's very critical. So I agree, Danielle. It's going to be really interesting to see how folks, react to this in Orlando.
But just to add one thing, so I completely agree with Rob, right? Like, I know it's supposed to be Provoke, and I probably should come up with an angle to disagree, Rob. But I think really it is about, like, there's no place for violence, there's no place for threats. There should be an open forum for a vigorous debate of ideas, right? And that if some of the steps that are taken, if people feel like they can't share ideas, because Connect is a marketplace of ideas, right? And if that gets tamped out or turned off, then the value goes away as well, right? So I think, Rob, to your point, it makes a ton of sense that, like, you don't want to get to a point where people don't feel like they can share their beliefs and debate ideas because it might offend someone, right? And that's the slope that has to be measured against. But I think when you look at violence or threats, like, I think we all agree there's no place for that.
100%.
That's where that comes in. So I don't know, Rob, if you have any additional thoughts on that, but.
The only thought I have is just imagine if the scenario were these guys just talking, crude, lewd, Donald Trump way of, who's the hottest chick you banged off Tinder, and, I got, trophies from every one of these conferences, and it was, suppose it was that kind of behavior, right? Ending them. Because they're like, look, I mean, okay, so they're schmucks, so they're not people you want dating your daughter, but they're not threatening anybody. They're not being vile. They're not being, and I think that's where we're headed next. Or it might be somebody just has an opinion. Like, you guys, I think, are releasing a study about women in leadership, right? what if there's some guy who's just an out and out sexist, says, women should never be in leadership. They should be in the kitchen, with their aprons on. Like, that's vile. Right? And Danielle's shaking her head like, it's stupid. He has every right to, to say that and be that guy, and other people can jump on him and say, you're an idiot and you're a moron. It's almost like the only cure for bad speech is more speech, right? And again, things like violence and threat of violence, or really suggestive, that's going over the line a little bit. But yeah, for the most part, I think my concern is around that. So hopefully, as an industry, because we're not kids, we're not college kids with who need safe spaces and pillows and mommies. Like from a professional grown-up standpoint, maybe we all just have to grow slightly thicker skin on the one hand. At the same time, take a hard line. Have to take a hard stance for this type of stuff is not acceptable. We're not allowing this. And the only thing there's just violence and threats. Apart from that, you want to be a doofus, you want to be a jackass, go ahead and be a doofus and a jackass. And we're going to answer it not by, trying to get you fired from your job and all this stuff, just by arguing with you. It's like, no, you're a doofus, you're a jackass, and here's why you're wrong, and then have that open exchange. I mean, I think that's where I would love to see this go.
Yeah.
And hopefully that's what will happen.
Yeah, we'll see how it all plays out. So, all right, just to wrap up quickly, we're going to talk about a couple of the upcoming stories. Obviously, we mentioned that there's a special report on women. Why aren't more women in real estate leadership, which I find interesting because as I was thinking about my local board, it's mostly comprised of women. So maybe I'm not seeing that here, but it should be interesting to see what that article says. One other thing, which seems to be obviously a big discussion because the election is coming up quickly, is another article is being politically correct inauthentic. So, I think there's definitely people that stand on either side of this. I do not ever discuss politics or religion on any social media just because I don't want to potentially lose somebody that wants to work with me as their agent or someone that might want to come over to my brokerage. But I know there's a lot of people out there that will just blast every opinion and feeling they have. And I think obviously it's a very hot topic right now because it's hard to keep your mouth shut. I mean, for me, I'm watching the debate the other night and I'm like, I just want to tweet about this so bad. And I just have to be quiet, So yeah, this should be what do you guys think about that?
You get a gold star from Line and Orb's perspective, Danielle, because that is exactly what we tell our clients and our friends is no matter how tempting it is, don't touch it. It's not worth it to alienate your clients, your prospects. And at the end of the day, if you're in politics, post away. If you're in the clergy, if your business is religion, post away. But everyone else that uses social as a soapbox, it's fine that they do it. I'm personally not going to follow them, but they have that right, of course. And at the end of the day, they just have to accept that they're alienating potentially 50% of friends, clients, family. So kudos to you. And it'll be interesting to see how that one comes out. I know Rob has a little bit of a different take on this. So Rob, talk to us.
My take on it is be who the hell you are, right? Because just because you're faking it doesn't mean, or not talking it doesn't mean we don't know. You know what I'm saying? It's not, people aren't that stupid. So if you want to talk about politics, talk about politics. If you want to talk about religion, talk about religion. If you want to talk about whatever it is you want, as long as you're willing to accept the consequences.
Exactly.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I just happened to grow up in a household where, politics and religion were for the dinner table and or like when we're in private, but not for something to go out there and make a show of myself, and make public stances because it's not my business. So that's just the way I was raised. And definitely what we tell people, no matter how tempting it is, don't even like that post. To your point, Danielle, don't tweet it. It's not worth it at the end of the day.
Well, yeah, and no offense to anybody that's doing this, but I guess I'm curious when you're posting, whether it's on Facebook or Twitter or wherever, about which presidential candidate is wrong or right, do you really believe, Rob, that your opinion is going to change somebody's vote?
No, of course not. And I I don't mind talking about politics, right?
Yeah.
And the only issue that I really get vocal about is gun rights. And I know there are people who disagree with me on that. That's fine, you know. But I do it because that's who I am, and I feel like being genuine. You know, yeah, it might alienate some people. It might, you know, piss some people off. But probably those aren't probably people I want to be friends with anyway. So you know, I don't care. Now so as a result, I think I'm a terrible line or customer, which is why I would never. They would just throw themselves crazy trying to deal with me. And I just recognize there's different styles. Like I don't blame anybody, you know, if they don't want to talk about contentious issues, right? It's like, look, you got to, because ultimately the end goal is be whoever you want, say whatever you want, do whatever you want, just be ready to pay the price for whatever you're doing. Right? That's it. The only thing about that, it's the only thing I will say, if you do take a position, one of the interesting benefits is the people who agree with you like you more. There is that to consider, right?
Yeah.
So just from a straight business standpoint, if I lived in a town that was 90% Hillary supporters, right, but I'm a secret Trump supporter, I might go out and be like, I'm with her, you know, go Hillary, just from a straight business standpoint, because those people will like you more.
Yeah.
Versus if you don't have an opinion at all. It's something to consider. So everything to me is price versus, you know, what you have to do, you know, risk versus reward.
Yep. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And I look forward to seeing all of you. I don't know if I'll see any of you at NAR. If not, we'll see you in New York.
See you in there.
All right. Bye, guys.
See you there. Bye.
Bye.